My name is Artie Kuhn. I'm a faculty member up here at Miami. Before I was that, I'm a designer, and so creatives like me, we kind of tend to jump around professionally. We get a little antsy and we got to move around and stuff like that. And so I started off my career designing action figures, which is super cool. And designed like Star Wars and Jurassic Park and Transformers and Pokemon. And I was actually at the company that was doing all this work when Pokemon became like a thing in the United States. And I worked there when the character Articuno was developed. And I will or not confirm nor deny that Articuno is named after me. So started doing that kind of stuff, then transitioned into interaction design, so designing stuff for a screen that people are touching and feeling and moving their mouse and all that kind of stuff. And then moved from that doing product design and development. And product design and development is just the idea of, hey, we're a company, we want to make new things that don't exist, what should we make? That is like that was my job. And most of the people that I worked with when I was doing that, their methodology, their kind of way of working was, let's throw like 30 ideas against the wall. Let's make 30 things, and like maybe one or two will connect, and then the revenue that's generated by those one or two will sustain the next wave of throwing 30 things against the wall and see what connects. And you know, I was doing that, and while I was there, the company I was working for acquired this startup in San Francisco, and the startup, they didn't do things that way. They had this like bonkers, weird success rate where like 100% of the time they were knocking things out of the park. They weren't just throwing 30 things up and hoping two stick. They were just throwing the two, and that was it. And they were successful every single time. And the folks that I worked with were like, that's weird, we don't understand, they're weirdos. And I was like, wait a minute, they're doing something different than we're all doing. I need to like figure that out. So I kind of finagled my way onto that team. And the stuff that I learned there changed everything for me. It changed the trajectory of what I did with my life, which I know that most of us can't say that about our careers, but for me, this stuff just really changed everything. And so that's what I'm going to talk about this morning really quick, is the stuff that I observed that they were doing and the impact that it had on my life. And to kind of capture what they were doing, I'm going to tell a little story. So let's get in our DeLoreans and travel back a couple of decades. And P&G, which is a company we all know about in Cincinnati. They make everything from like Tide to diapers to Febreze. They are hugely successful. They have products all over the place making gobs and gobs of money, and they're just dominating. And so one of the things they're doing is they're kind of surveying the landscape and trying to figure out what is a product space that we can move into that hasn't been changed very much. It's really kind of stagnant, and we can kind of go in and like just blow everything out of the water. And so the space that they identified was the mop. And when you think about it, mops suck. Mops are the worst. They're the most disgusting, foul things on the planet. Let me explain. The only time the mop is clean, ever, is when you buy it at the store. That's the only time the mop is ever clean for the life of the mop. Because you get this clean mop, you bring it home, you unwrap it, and you dip it in water, and then you rub it around on your sludge-infested floor, getting like dog hair and slime and all kinds of stuff on it, and then you put it back in the water, thus contaminating the water, and then you take it back out, and basically the mop is like a sludge redistribution program. It just spreads all the grossness out. That's all it does, okay? So they look at this and realize the mop, that is a space that needs some change. It can be made better. And so, at the time, P&G had tons of money and tons of bright people. They had more PhDs employed than any other company on the planet. So lots and lots of smart people. And so they've kind of provisioned off a group of engineers and put them in a lab and say, hey, engineers in the lab, what we want you to do is make a better mop. And so they go and they reformulate the materials the mop can be made out of, but it's not really like it kind of falls apart, or it's crazy expensive materials or something like that. And then they try, well, maybe the soap can be made better, so it can clean the water, the gross water can clean better. And so they come up with this new formulation, and it's awesome, but it like eats the skin off your hand. Like that kind of stuff is happening over in the lab. And in the process, they're kind of burning through time and money and resources, and they realize, like, we are not going to get this done in time. And so they kind of have like this Hail Mary pass, where they bring in this external design firm to come and help them out. And so the external design firm has done something different, something no one else was expecting. So you see, the engineers kind of kept the problem at a distance. They're kind of locked away in their lab. And the designers took all that research that the engineers had come up with and just threw it in the trash and said, no, we're going to instead go to where the problem is, rather than keep it at a distance. And so they identified a neighborhood, and they went house to house to house, and they brought along a little can full of coffee grounds, and they would go into the house and talk about mopping, and then they would just kind of accidentally spill the coffee grounds in the ground and watch people mop and see kind of what's their mopping process. All right, so they're going house to house to house, and they finally come to this house, this little old lady, and she opens the door, and she is so pumped to talk about mopping. This is like the mopping queen. She's like the mopping expert. She loves to mop. She wakes up in the morning dreaming of mopping. Like, that is how much she is into mops. All right, so they're like, all right, yeah, right. We like paid her. This is like the perfect customer. So they come in, and she's so pumped to talk about mopping, mopping this, mopping that, all over the place. She leads them into her kitchen, and they sit down. She's talking about mopping. She's a nice old lady, and like the old ladies are. And so she's like, I'm gonna get some cookies. And so she gets up and gets some cookies. And while she's getting the cookies, they spill their coffee grounds on the ground. And the little lady turns, she says, oh, don't worry about it, grabs a paper towel, runs underneath the water, and swooshes up the coffee grounds. And at that moment, the Swiffer was born. At that moment, the designer said, oh, it isn't a mop. We're not making a better mop. We're making something that's completely different. It turns it all on its head. And when you think about all a Swiffer is a paper towel on a stick with a squirt gun. Like, that's the whole thing, okay? And yet, it's a $500 million industry right now in 15 countries, all from some little old lady's paper towel and some water. And so I heard that story, and I saw this process playing out with the people that I worked with, where instead of keeping problems at a distance, which is how I have been operating, where I'm kind of in my office thinking of big ideas, instead, I started to bring my team and myself into the space where our customers were actually experiencing problems and observing and talking to them and trying to empathize with them. And in the process, it just turned everything around for me. Like, my professional career, it really took off, started to have more and more things stick to the wall than everybody else, and it was huge. And I also started to like have this insight where it's like, oh, this is really great professionally, but it also started to bleed into my personal life, where I started to realize, hey, there's a lot of problems that I'm keeping at arm's length, but instead, what if I actually were to step into those problems and try to deal with them and try to really get close to them rather than keeping them far away? And so things like figuring out finances or figuring out relationships or whatever, instead of trying to keep those things away and doing this a lot, instead of actually step in and try to understand. And as I started to see that that's starting to work, I started to see that stuff started to bubble up when I was reading the Bible. See, for a long, long time, I agreed with the words that I was reading. I agreed with what Jesus would say, but I wasn't seeing the things that he was doing and doing those types of things. Does that distinction make sense? I started to see I need to be doing the stuff that he's doing, not just agreeing with him. And so one of the things that I saw was that he operated in that same way. Instead of keeping people at a distance, God steps close to them and tries to understand and empathize with their problems. You know, at the very beginning of Jesus' life, John, chapter 1 of John, the author's writing about Jesus and God, and he says that God became flesh and moved into the neighborhood. They didn't keep people at a distance. He actually got closer. And not only do you see that like in this big idea at the beginning of John, but you see that throughout Jesus' life. There were a couple times where he healed people from a distance, but almost every time, he actually got close to them. There's just one story where he's dealing with this blind guy, and the blind guy wants to see, and you know, he's Jesus. He could go like, ba-ding, and you know, the guy would be able to see. Instead, what he chose to do is like, he spit on the ground, bent down, worked up some mud, and rubbed mud in the guy's eyes, and that's how he healed him. It's like, man, if the God of the universe is willing to roll up his sleeves and get to work and get his hands dirty, that says something, right? Or like, let's go even further, way back to in Genesis. It's talking about how God created everything. It says he spoke this into existence, and he spoke that into existence, and he spoke that into existence. But when he got to you and me, he bent down and sculpted us out of clay. And then it says that he breathed life into us. And you can't breathe into a balloon from across the room. You have to like get up in that balloon in order to blow the air in the balloon, right? And so he had to like get up. He wants to get close to us. And so I started thinking about my life and how I wanted to have an impact. And I wanted my life to matter. And that meant that I couldn't just get close to my own problems. I had to start getting close to the problems of the people that were around me. And so I needed to start having more serious and more spiritual conversations with my coworkers and my neighbors. And so I started to step into that And it worked, kind of. But it's really hard, at least for me and how I'm wired when I'm interacting with people. I didn't see a ton of life change with those folks. Why? Because like once you have a mortgage and a fancy car loan and kids that want to go to Disneyland, it's really hard to experience life change because everything's kind of set. You're like cement that's set up. At the same time, I was teaching as an adjunct just on the side, and I started having conversations with college kids and started realizing like I saw tremendous return on investment from these conversations with college kids because they were still wet cement. You know, it's kind of like if I were to get in a plane to fly to San Francisco, if you're just off by like a degree or two, you'll end up in LA because the distance is so great. These college kids were way at the beginning, and if you could just kind of slightly shift their trajectory just a little bit, they would end up in huge, huge different places. And so I realized, okay, if I want to get closer to the problem rather than keep my arm's length at it, I'm going to have to like change my life a little bit. Because I need to get, for me, how I'm wired, the people that I'm connecting with in this way are college-age people. And to do that, that means some pretty significant changes. That means I need to go back to school and get like a terminal degree. That means I'm going to take a huge pay cut. It means I'm going to have to move and disrupt everything. And so I did that, and it sucked. It sucked so bad. Like, you can see my checkbook and see that it sucks. Like, it is a measurable suck, right? It sucked. But it is awesome, and it is good, and it is transformative to me and to the students that I get to interact with. Because it's this huge return on investment. It's like these little changes now, while they're still wet cement, can play out huge over the long trajectory. And so I realized that God wants me to keep on getting uncomfortable, to keep on rolling up my sleeves and get to work and get my hands dirty. And I think that's the same thing that He wants all of us to do. Like right now, I'm not comfortable right now because I'm sitting up here. But normally, I'm out where you're all sitting, and I'm totally comfortable because you're all in basically the same life stage as I am and all that kind of stuff. Summers in Crossroads, Oxford, you know, there's like 50 or 60 of us. We're all kind of at the same life stage. It's easy. But like, you know, like in Game of Thrones, winter is coming. Like around here, like fall is coming. Like it's all going to end, right? The short lines of Chipotle, those are going to be things that pass in just a couple weeks. When students get back, these 60 people are going to suddenly be 300 or whatever. And I'm going to be surrounded by a bunch of people that aren't like me. And it'd be a lot easier for me to step back like those engineers and keep those problems at a distance. But instead, what I'm trying to do, and I hope all of us do, is lean in and step closer to those problems. Not that people are problems, but that we step closer to those students and their problems and try to help them. You know, one of the quotes that, as I wrap up, that has really stuck with me about this is there's this guy named C.T. Studd. And he was like, in the 19th century, he was like this professional athlete turned whatever. He left and wherever he was and went to China and Africa and started doing work there. And he said this: some want to live within the sound of church or chapel bell. I want to run a rescue shop within a yard of hell. That's what I want. I don't want to be just comfortable within a church or chapel bell. I want to run a rescue shop within a yard of hell. And I hope it's what you guys all want to do, and that we together as a team can step closer to folks so that we can be within a yard of hell. Thanks. That's all I got.
I am thankful.